Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Orbit Live event with fantasy authors Trudi Canavan and Devin Madson. Trudi is the author of the Millennium Rule series. The fourth and final book of the series is Maker's Curse and comes out next week on May 19th. Devin Madson is the debut author of We Ride the Storm, the first book of her Reborn Empire series, which comes out next month on June 23rd. You should see a green button on your screen if you're in Crowdcast that says Buy Trudi and Devin's books. Click there to open a window with links to buy their books from retailers in the US, UK, and Australia and New Zealand. This event is being recorded, and you'll be able to access the replay using the same Crowdcast link you used to enter the event. If you have friends who are interested but cannot attend live, they'll also be able to watch the replay after the event concludes. So feel free to share the link with them. We're also streaming live to Orbit's Twitter and Facebook accounts. Trudi and Devin will be talking to each other about their books, and they'll also be answering your questions. If you're watching directly from Crowdcast, at the bottom of the screen, you'll see an Ask a Question button. You can enter your questions there and also vote on your fellow attendees' questions. The questions with the most votes will be answered first. If you're watching on Twitter or Facebook, feel free to ask your questions within those platforms and I'll relay them to the authors. And last but not least, follow Orbit Live on Crowdcast to be notified about future events. Next week, we have an event with fantasy authors Rowena Miller and Tasha Suri. And the week after, we'll have Evan Winter and K.S. Veloso. And now, without further ado, I'll turn the event over to Trudi and Devin.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Devin.
Totally.
I just finished reading your book and I absolutely loved it. From start to finish, I was just captivated. I had to eke it out, so I was reading like 3 chapters a day, to 4, 5 to 6, and then it was like, oh, I'm just going to stay up late and finish this because I have to know how it ends. So when is the next book coming out?
The next one is out in January.
Okay, I have to wait that far.
I'm sure we can poke for advanced copies.
I'll poke you for an advanced copy. Yeah.
We can poke the voice of God.
Yes. So you were saying just before we were on, you were saying that you were writing it in like 10 weeks or something, or is that the most recent one?
The third book, yeah. I had a really tight deadline to write the third book because I also had to rewrite and re-edit the 3 books of my original trilogy. So all of the extra time I would have had to write the next book, I spent in like rotational edits that kind of.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a bit intense. So I had a bit more time for the 4th book, but the 3rd one, I ended up having to do it in about 10 weeks.
Wow.
It's been fun.
Yeah. Are you getting to have a bit of a rest now?
Yeah. It's I'm going to take a break afterwards. Actually, I still have 4 or 5 weeks to get it in, but then I'll have a rest, which will be nice.
Oh, good. Yeah. You definitely need the rest after a big hectic thing. I think with one of my first trilogy, I had to get it ready for submitting to the editor. This was before it was even published. And because it was like, oh my God, yeah. So I had to rewrite it in about 6 weeks. I had written it before, but I had to practically rewrite it from scratch. And I was up every morning at 6 a.m. writing through to like 10 o'clock to midnight at night. Every single day, boyfriend complaining completely. He was never seeing me except the back of my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was insane. I hope to never do that again. I've never had to do that again. Because certainly over the years,
that's good.
I've taken longer and longer and longer to write books. And this is this weird deja vu scenario where I've swapped over because I was at a French convention once where Robin Hobb was on the same panel as me. And I was talking about how quick I could write average of 5,000 words a day. And she's going, oh my God. Because as I've got older, I've just found RSI and back problems, and it slows down. So I wish I could still write the speed I used to. And she was saying the same thing. As you get older, things set in, and you go, those halcyon days.
Oh. Oh, that's good. I actually invested in a very special keyboard in the hope that it will extend the life of my writing hands. So we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Over the years, I've tried almost everything you can think of. Special keyboard, special chair. I've got a tablet instead of a mouse, which helps with the hands.
Yeah.
It's a more natural use to doing that as opposed to a mouse. And when I write, I actually have the mouse on that side, on the left side, so I even it out between. Anyway, do you have any questions for me?
Oh, that's really smart. I like that. I don't know, I guess what is it like being, one of the foremost fantasy authors for a whole country? Because Australia has such a small industry. It's like you have been the one that's been here for a really long time. A lot of the fantasy authors that were writing when you started don't write fantasy anymore. A lot of them shifted into historicals. So I guess what's that experience been like for you?
It creeps up on you. You don't realize it's happening. You don't realize that people are peeling off to the side, and because you're sitting there working hard, and almost blinkers on. And if anything, I think the reason for it is because of the overseas success, particularly in the UK. And that has kept it going because I was published in Australia separately, US, UK, Australia, for the first 2 series. And then when I went to do the sequel, we put it to auction, and the UK won the auction because they had done such brilliant publicity. And that, I think, is what carried on because they got a good, and then of course they're really good with the publicity and they push and push. Not that the other publishers aren't, but they brought in they seem to be the ones that actually stopped having those awful covers that we used to have. The ones that look like really bad C-grade fantasy movies where some guy is going whoa, oh, 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 and the princesses were going, oh, break my nails. They just look terrible. And Orbit was one of the first ones to change the look of the covers to make them look really cool, hooded person. And then, of course, that became really untrendy as well because there were so many hooded people covers. So, but what's it like? It's sort of 99% of the time I'm just me at home writing. And every now and then, it's only when I do things like this or I go out to a convention that I go, oh, that's right. Just little me. But yeah, it's also good. It is a good boost to the ego. It helps drive you on to keep writing when you're having those bad days. So yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah. May you write many more years to come.
Yeah, like I said, I'm slowing down. I'm actually taking a bit of a rest at the moment. I'm taking some time off. Yeah. So.
That's really good.
Waiting for the body to recover from the last mad. What seems like a mad dash to me, but compared to yours is nothing.
Yeah. Wow. Should we do some questions?
Yes. Yeah. So it's the question with the greatest votes. We've got 5, 4, 2, 2, 2, 0, 1. So the first one is
our top question.
Would you like to?
Yeah. Do you want to read it or shall I?
I'll let you.
I will. Okay.
Go first.
It is. Do you think there are ways in which you, as an Australian author, approach fantasy stories differently from American or British writers? Example, are your fantasy creatures more likely to be extremely deadly? What do you think?
Well, I think yes, not because the creatures are more deadly. I've often had people say to me when I've looked at your maps in your books that you've got the hottest regions up high and the coldest regions down low, and that seemed really strange to them. And I went, it's not strange to me. There were really subtle things like that, and I didn't even realize I did it that way. I just thought all fantasy maps always have the cold things to the top, and I'll just swap it around. And it felt perfectly natural. I think we don't assume that the animals are going to be cows and sheep and bears, and our animal. Like I've always made up animals because it throws me out of the story when I see something that familiar that they'll have snakes and whatnot. And then only the fantasy creatures are actually different. It's like, you're writing an entire fantasy world. You can make stuff up that's just amazing. Why wouldn't you? Why just have cows? Why just have lions? Even like kangaroos. In fact, you couldn't have kangaroos because it's so strange to people reading fantasy that it would throw them out of the book. So, yeah, make stuff up. It's fun.
Yeah.
That's you.
I do the same thing with my maps. Now that you mention it, the hot places are at the top and the cold places are at the bottom. And, I didn't really think about it at the time. It was just, well, that's how it works for us. So, that's for sure. And I think we think about distances because everything in Australia is really so far away that I give an awful lot of thought to how long it would actually take to get to a place and sort of the difficulties of the journey. I find that things like that are kind of just a bit more natural to the Australian mindset. But otherwise, I think the only other thing I've noticed that I bring to the idea is, in Australia, we have that sense of being part of, the kind of Western world without actually being anywhere near it. And so there's a weird sense of isolation, which I find kind of crops up occasionally in my books with various, characters and themes and things. And I go, oh, I know where that comes from. That comes from this pain of watching everybody else do all these great events and get to see each other and do these things. And we're just sitting over here. And it's too far, it's too expensive. And so I feel like there's a weird cultural, social feeling of isolation from the wider spec-fic community that tends to crop up in the stuff that I write.
Yeah, I certainly know when I was trying to get published in the 90s, the saying was that you couldn't get published overseas unless you had an agent, and you couldn't get an agent overseas unless you were published overseas. So
yeah.
you couldn't win.
What are you supposed to do?
So you had to start local. And so you'd start with the local publishers and you get published here, and then you'd be able to prove yourself, and then you get published overseas and you'd attract the agent and that sort of thing. And what happened at one stage there, we started to get people from overseas trying to get published here first so they could then do the same thing. So it's very strange. But of course, now that with the internet and globalization,
really
that's no longer a problem. So
that's interesting kind of change for the last, sort of slowly over the last 20 years that's no longer the case anymore.
Yeah. You get a lot more options now. I mean, self-publishing was something that people did when they'd exhausted absolutely every possibility, and then they went to do these little print-on-demand things, and you saw their books at the newsagent, and you felt sorry for them, and now it's like, yay, fantastic.
Now it's a big thing,
yeah,
for sure. Do you want to read the next question?
Okay. 11 questions. Okay. 3332220. Okay, so one of the twos, no, the three. The second one. Okay, do you start with a world in mind, or with certain characters that you then build a world around?
I think for me, all of my books are written in the same world. So I guess in a lot of ways I started with the world, but I didn't sit down and do I'm going to sit down and do a day of world building. I didn't think like that. It was just when I first started writing, I just slowly built the world while I was writing. And now every time I go back to start a new story, I already have a world that I'm going back to. So in a lot of ways, I let the way the world was be shaped by the characters and the stories I wanted to tell. But now it's a bit of a weird balancing act where so the characters and the stories I was telling shape the world, but now the world also shapes the characters and the stories that I tell. So it's kind of ended up a little bit weird because I continuously go back to the same world. But yes, normally I would start with the idea of the characters and then kind of develop the world along as I went. But now it's a little bit messy.
Yeah, unless you can create some new countries, add them to the worlds.
Yeah, I've got
Constantly do
some that are, like I skip forward in time and I skip like across the continent and stuff in different ideas that I've got. So there will be, it will feel like new worlds at different times, but a lot of the like the magic rules will always be the same because it's the same scientific basis.
Yep. Interesting. That's a good segue because I think technically it means that I start with the world because I always start with the magic system. And the magic system, I'm just, it's my number one thing I'm fascinated with. So once I think of a way a magic system would work, then I think, how would it affect people? And then from there, the world then develops around that. So with the Black Magician trilogy, it was the idea of that if magic was latent and it had to be brought out by other people, then the people who were the teachers, the people who brought that magic out, would be the most powerful people in society. So then that built into a guild. And then, of course, you had to throw the spanner in the works, which was the character for whom their magic came out naturally. And so they had to then find them and teach them because it was very dangerous if they didn't. So, and then, of course, that brought in the class differences and the fear between of Sonia because she doesn't really know what's really going on, and the magicians are afraid because they know how powerful she is and just how destructive it could be if things went badly. And so magic.
And suddenly you have the whole story.
Yeah, magic comes first.
Yeah,
and the characters grow out of that because you then put the people in that situation, and then the world itself starts to grow around that because they start to draw. This is where the part where it's like, world is plasticine. I sort of get in there and start throwing color in and start manipulating, drawing from this world, and I tend to just pick bits and pieces from different kinds of cultures rather than actually base them on cultures. Whereas I notice that you are actually basing on actual cultures of this world, which is fascinating. You sit there and pick them. And go, how much has she taken and how much has she put two together? This sort of thing.
Yeah. Mine's all a bit of a mess because there's a lot of history kind of in the background of why they've ended up the way they have. So
yeah, I really want to go back and read the first 3 books, the previous trilogy, because I get the feeling that's going to really fill in some of the questions I've got. It'll keep me going.
Yeah, it's
now and next January.
Yeah. Well, they're out in August, so.
Okay. But they're available as ebooks, aren't they? Yeah. Because I predominantly
read the reissued ones are going to be August 4th. Because I had to redo them. So.
Okay. Did you change them at all?
Still time. Yeah, I did. So I actually, especially the second book, because like I originally published the first one in 2013, and the skill level difference between 2013 and 2019 was fairly substantial. So I think I probably only changed the first book by about sort of 15-20%, but the second book was something like 75% of it was
okay.
It began and ended in the same places because the third book barely changed, but the actual what happened was really quite substantially different. So it was quite an interesting process.
Yeah. So you would probably prefer I wait till August.
Yes. Don't read the old ones. Don't read those. All right, let's find another question.
Yep.
What have we got? All right, the other one we've got 3 votes. We've got, okay, so Devin, this is your debut novel, and Trudi, you've published many fantasy novels. Do you have any advice for aspiring writers based on your particular place in your careers?
Interesting. First thing I'd say to any writer at any stage in their career is look after your body. We're all such cerebral people. We sit there and we get obsessed. And I know I just get transported into the world I'm in, and I do not. My ex used to. I'd suddenly hear the little voice from the door, and I'd look down, and here was a cup of tea, and this little voice would say, and a cup of tea would appear beside her, and she never thought to question where it came from. But I've got RSI, and I've got a very bad back problem now. So I wish I could go back and tell my earlier self, go for walks, do the exercises, get fit, give your hands a rest. I probably would have more. I'd probably be in a better shape now I think, than I would have been, but I would be now. Yeah. So, and I guess the second thing I would say is it's a really weird sensation where if you write something, the first thing you write is often in reaction to what's around. And when I was first writing, everything was about the boy goat herd. He discovered he was after a big long quest, discovered he was the prophesized lost prince. And I just went, I'm sick of prophecy. Why can't it just happen? Because it happens, because people work hard and have integrity and etc. Why does it have to be a goat herd? Why can't it just be an ordinary, why does it have to be a goat herd who's a prince? Why can't it just be an ordinary person who's a girl? And
girl,
why are there never any gay people in these books? Why are there never any disabled people in these books? And it's just it wasn't like I was trying to be political. I just didn't, the worlds that are around would just seem so fairy tale like in their structure, and I wanted something a bit more gritty. So I wrote that, and then 10 years later, I get all these people complaining, why have all the books these days got strong female characters who are magicians? It's like, they weren't back then. And why are there always this? Why are there always that? So when I wrote them, this was different. So you've got to hope that one day your books are going to seem cliche, which is really, really weird thing to think, because all those things have changed for the better.
Oh, that's really good. I think main advice that I have for people is, the really boring perseverance. I can remember, the first time I sat down and wrote a fantasy novel, I thought it was the most amazing thing that had ever been written. Because we do that, you have that idea of your ability to kind of question your own work and read your own work in a way that is actually critical takes time to develop, quite a long time to develop. So it's natural to think that the first thing that you write is really fantastic. That's quite normal. And then you just have to keep, you got to not stop there. You don't stop there and go, yeah, okay, I'm great. You have to go, yeah, but the thing is, if you listen to any established author talk, they'll tell you that they always worry that what they're writing is trash. And the reason that they always worry that what they're writing is trash is because they're constantly leveling up their ability to assess their own work, to assess other people's work. And so if you don't work on that skill as well and question, but could I do this better? Or read a book that you love and try to figure out why you loved it. What did they do that made you really connect with this character or that thing? Then you don't level up that skill, which means you can't level up the writing skill. So I think it's just never being complacent with where you're at and always wanting to do better. That striving and the perseverance of going, look, it takes a while, the first trilogy I wrote was 800,000 words long and it will never see the light of day. And I rewrote it 60,000 times. So, there's a lot of words behind most authors before you ever see anything. There are trunk novels and there are...
Yeah. All right. 1 million words or something is 1 million words before you get any good at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those 1 million words, they might be thrown away, but they're actually valuable. The stuff you throw away is still valuable because you learned something. Yeah.
So definitely don't despair of doing the 1 million words of practice that it's not an exact science. 1 million words might not get you there, or you might have gotten there beforehand, but just keeping on working at it.
You have to love that self-edit, because you will still be doing it 15 books later, I can tell you.
It's not changing.
No, well, if anything, when you relinquish the book to the publisher, it's because it's at a state where you can, but it's never perfect. You have to accept that if you were going to make it perfect, it would never go to the publisher.
It would never go. Never. No, that's it. You would never read our books if we were to be 100% satisfied with them.
Yeah, and that's why I hate reading my own work, because I want to sit there and edit it.
Yes. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to do.
So,
all right, do you want to grab another question?
Yep. Okay. What's the one fantasy trope you unabashedly love without shame? Magic.
Oh, I'm really terrible with tropes. Like I've never really, like I think I can think of tropes in like, there are people who create their books based on like collections of tropes. And I only really realized that tropes were actually a thing that we could discuss like really recently. I think one of the things I really love in fantasy novels that I think is a trope is like the kind of collection of people, so like you're collecting like a little group, almost like a found family kind of thing of people who can kind of bounce off each other in really fun ways. I think that's got to be one of my favorite things to have in a, it's really fun and you can do a lot of stuff with that. So I think that's probably one of the fantasy tropes that I like the most.
Yeah. I must admit, I do like the mysterious, reticent man who is all broody and but I like playing with it. Sometimes it could be the romantic interest and sometimes it's not the romantic interest. You suddenly realize you open up the package and no, I would not go there.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good. And I think we had the opposite to this question, actually.
Yes.
So what's one fantasy trope you wish would die in a fire?
Zombies. I hate zombies. To the point that there's some things that just you don't have that willing suspension of disbelief. And I've never had it with zombies. It's like once the body starts rotting, it's not going to move no matter how much a willpower is in there or whatever. It's just, you may as well have ghosts. If something's animating the bones, then why have the bones at all? And so, I hate zombies with such a passion that when I first started watching Game of Thrones with Paul, he's read the books. So we're both watching it for the first time. And it's like within 5 minutes, I just turned to Paul and said, "This has zombies in it, doesn't it?" And he went, yes. And I'm like, why does it have to have zombies? I want to like this so much.
Well, it's such a shame. Mine probably is the prophecy idea.
Oh my God, yes.
I'm not sure whether it's because it's being done a lot or because it kind of tends to railroad stories and characters and ideas. But I guess the great flip side of that is I really like it when prophecies are messed around with, so like that is something I really like to play with, this idea that, hey, this is totally a prophecy, but whatever, it's because we've always had those prophecies or those ideas of the future. That's normal. Like people like to do that. We thought the world was going to end in, I don't know, 2012 or whatever it was because of the Mayan calendar. We do those things. So I like that people do those things, but then the world doesn't end or but and that it affects people the way they approach stuff, I think is really fascinating. So I hate the trope when it's done straight, but if you're going to mess with it, I'm really here for it.
Yeah. It's like, the whole thing I hated back from sort of the 80s when you'd have a map and you could look at the map and go, I know exactly where they're going to go on their plot, on their quest. And then the prophecy always looked at that and went, well, you just give me a little puzzle that was dead easy to work out and now I know exactly what's going to happen and why will I read the book now? But the interesting thing is that my latest series, Millennium's Rule, is a prophecy. And so at one stage, one of the characters says it's just a, I'm trying to remember what he says. It's on a bookmark of mine. It's like it's not a prophecy. It's just a guess at an inevitable change, And then there's a second prophecy in the most recent book because I was going to do a series of. Well, I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to set up this. Whether it was going to be a trilogy or 4 books, 2 trilogies, or whether it was going to be a 5-book series. And it ended up being a 4-book series. But I knew there were going to be 2 prophecies. There was the Millennium's Rule, and then there was the Maker's Curse. And I've totally played with both of them. Like I had a lot of fun with that. It's kind of one of the bases of the story.
Yes, so here for that. That's brilliant. Who's turn to ask a question? I've forgotten where we were.
My turn, I think. Yes.
I think it's your turn. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, I've got. Hang on. They're flicking around at the moment. Other than one of your own, is there a book that had significant impact for each of you as a professional writer?
Oh, oh.
Diana
really
Wynne
interesting
Jones.
one.
Diana Wynne Jones' Tough Guide to
Yeah.
Fantasyland. I don't know if you've ever seen that book. It is hilarious.
I've never read it, no.
I think Hunter Dad, it's so funny. You just, it's like it's written like a guidebook to Fantasyland. So it's like a Lonely Planet book. And it's alphabetical, and you go through, and it's like, it talks about color coding. If you meet someone with green eyes, they're a sorcerer. And you go, oh no, I did that. It's like horses. Horses actually breed by pollination. There's no way that work. And it's just hilarious. So you go through it and you go, oh, I did that. Oh no, I did that. I have to change that now. Oh, it's too late.
Yeah.
It's a very,
oh gosh,
very
it
good
sounds
book.
like both hilarious and scary.
Yeah, I think someone ought to do a new version because it was written I think it was published in the 90s, and there's got to be another 20 years worth of cliches that could be riffed off in that book. It's so funny.
Yeah, I'm sure we could do a modern version of that. Yeah, I think mine was probably more recent. So rather than kind of formative, when I read Black Wolves by Kate Elliott, I continue to tell people this is my very favorite book ever, and I don't know that it will ever be surpassed, mostly because of the effect it had on me when I was reading it. It's not like it's the first book to have complicated, intricate nets of characters or world building or anything, but it came to me at exactly the time that I needed to have particular revelations about the creations of worlds and characters. And Kate Elliott does it so very beautifully always in all of her books. And this one just really, really spoke to me. And I often read a little bit with a little bit of a film of glass between me and the book, because I always expect a book to break my heart. And so I'm always like expecting that. And therefore I would distance myself very slightly from trying to fully engage with love of the characters as much as I fully engage with the book. And this one really didn't let me do that. I was completely smashed through my glass, and I had to put down the book multiple times for like moments because I just couldn't cope. And it's like, okay, this is one of those moments where I said, but how did you do that? How can I look at this as an author and go, all right, this is a whole thing. So if you haven't, everybody watching, if you haven't read Black Wolves by Kate Elliott, I do highly recommend it. It's really wonderful book, but also is just a fantastic study of how to put all of these things on the page and have an epic fantasy that there's not even all that much in the way of like action, like battles, but you feel like you're in one constantly. And like, how did she do that? And it was also the first book I'd ever seen toileting mentioned in world building. How does one go to the toilet in this particular society? Because the girl moves from one particular culture to another, and it's suddenly going, where's the bathroom? I don't know how to do it here. And it's so really kind of nicely done. And I just went, we never talk about these things. And that was just really fantastic. So
yeah, a bit like horses and pollination. It's like,
yeah,
it's so good that these things are covered, that you realize that the lack in other stories, other books.
Yes.
Yeah.
We just don't talk about them.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's funny.
What else have we got?
When you're sort of doing writing professionally, or even when you're not writing, not professionally written, published yet, one thing you do is you start ruining stories for you because you're critiquing mine. You can't turn off. And I found I came full circle. So that even though I'm more critical of books I'm reading, when I find one I really like, I'm just so excited. How did they do that? So you start to appreciate why something is so brilliant, and you enjoy it even more.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've definitely found that. I did go through that stage where it was much harder to really kind of get into and enjoy. But yeah, now it's as much for the craft of it as it is for the actual story itself. Yeah.
So I think it's
really good.
So I have to ask this, Devin.
So your turn on.
Oh, hang on, it disappeared. Wait. Devin, can you take us through your SPFBO experience?
Oh, so for people who don't know, the self-published fantasy blog off that Mark Lawrence runs. So the book We Ride the Storm, it was actually my second go through SPFBO. Most people don't realize that I entered it the year before with the first book of my original trilogy and was knocked out really fast in the first couple of weeks. So I guess it was. So it's a competition where Mark Lawrence hosts it on his blog. He has 10 different bloggers, 300 books. They each get 30 books, and they have 5 months, I think it is now, to read through the 30 books and pick one that is like their finalist. Then the last 10 finalists get read by all 10 bloggers. They all give them a score, and it's like a competition to try to bring self-published fantasy books that are really great to, you know, more attention. So a couple of authors now who have been through this, like so Jonathan French won, I think, the second year they did. He's traditionally published now. Josiah Bancroft was in it, but didn't make it to a finalist, and he was picked up by Orbit. So, you know, there's been a few, you know, kind of little success stories out of it. And just generally, it's great to bring more great self-published fantasy to, you know, a wider audience. So it can be a really nerve-wracking thing. Everybody's really lovely and respectful, but you know, it's still a competition. And as much as you tell yourself, it doesn't matter, it's just a competition, it has no bearing on my book, people like or don't like books for all kinds of personal reasons, it's still a competition and everybody gets really excited. And so it's hard not to buy into the kind of the tension and the hope of that. And I had the really stressful experience of being in a group of 30 books that had a whole bunch of really amazing books in it, and having to be in competition with all these amazing books even to get a finalist spot. And I actually didn't get the finalist spot because that went to a book called Orconomics, which is a very hilarious satire that actually went on to win the entire competition. So very, very well deserved there. But I got the Sunland safety net, they call it, which is the idea that if you have a second book that you think is really amazing, you can offer it to the other blogs. So I sat in this Sunland safety net, not knowing if I was going to be cut or I was going to be picked up by one of the other blogs who thought my book was better than the 30 that they had. So stressful is a shorthand way of saying what the competition was like. So I did end up getting picked up, went through into the finals. The finals were a bit less stressful for me because Orbit had actually contacted me about wanting to publish the book at the beginning of the finals. So I kind of felt like I'd already won in a lot of ways and didn't actually want to win the competition after that because I'm like, I want somebody else to be elevated. I ended up coming equal second. So it was really lovely. Yeah, it was really lovely being in the top 3 anyway. And everybody was really lovely.
When you're nominated, I've been nominated for the Aureus Awards and Ditmars a few times. And it's fabulous to win, of course. But if you don't, you've not lost anything. You know what I mean? Like,
no,
there's no losing. You're actually you've kind of soft won, and there's the woo one. You know what I mean? Like, you've not lost anything by not winning. You've actually, you know, realized that you were good enough to be considered, as far as I'm concerned, as my highest bar.
Is really that's the winning. I actually had the experience. We Ride the Storm, the self-published version, was nominated for Aureus Award in, what would that have been, the 2018 ones, I guess. And I went to the ceremony the first time that the ceremony was in Melbourne, and I was actually able to go. And so Sam Hawke, a friend of mine, I hope you're listening, Sam, was also nominated for her book, and had continuously told me that she was not going to write a speech because you know, she wasn't going to win, and so that was fine. Whatever. So of course I wrote one just in case I had to actually get up and do that, and it was going to be really nerve-wracking. And so I actually had to get up and do it because she did win the Aurealis Award. But that was more joy to me, getting up and accepting my friend's award for the thing that I was nominated for, because it was just like, it's such a big celebration of being like, well, we're all in this together. And it was honestly a highlight of my year was her winning instead of me. It was great.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I know Sam as well, but like, I don't know her personally, but we've met at conventions, and I've read her book. Her book's amazing.
Oh, book's amazing. Well,
now,
looking forward to the second one.
Remind me what her first book's called.
So the first one's City of Lies.
City of Lies,
and the second one will be Hollow Empire, which is out in December.
Another one that's going on my must-read as soon as it comes out list, because that first book, City of Lies, was amazing.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, it was great. All right, let's go to another question. All right, 2 votes on. Oh, you're going to love this one. How do you establish magic systems and rules?
Oh, well, this is my kind of, I won't say specialty, but it's the thing I really love doing. I usually start with, I like, the magic that was sort of around when I first started writing was very sort of incidental. There wasn't usually much in the way of systems. And if there was, it was usually like a very basic, like if you have magic, you're going to age faster, or it was always this penalty. And I thought, why not? What if magic was just like electricity? It was just another force that some people can tap into. And that's kind of been the basis for my magic system since then. But I quite like the idea of, like with the first series when the magic was latent, it's from within a person. And then I start thinking about the societal ways that would affect how people, interact with that magic. And then, so when I went to the next trilogy, which was The Age of the 5, instead of the magic being within a person, it's outside of a person. So it's their ability to take magic and how much they can do with that magic, which was the difference. And so in that world, people could use magic. Most of them only could do something as small as light a little fire or like a flame or something. But you could get so far as you could become immortal, and you could even get so far as becoming a god. So it had a much bigger potential for different situations, which I really loved. And also plants and animals could use it. So, and of course my rule was it has to be like nature.
That's really cool.
Has to be kind of scientific feeling. And so the only purposes that plants and animals would use it for, is the usual 3 motivation. It was fight, flight, or breeding, So then that gave me scope to come up with all sorts of cool ways that plants would lure animals or people in. They magically put them to sleep so they die, and then they absorb, nutrition, or, all these. Everything had to have like a magical reason, like the law of physics reason. Everything has to be same as this world, unless there's a fantasy explanation for it. So that was really fun. And then my third world, which is the Millennium's Rule trilogy, it was the same sort of thing, whereas the magic's everywhere and the person's ability to take that magic counts. But it's not so much what they can do with it, it's how far they can reach to pull the magic in. So it's slightly different that way. And it's a multiple world scenario. So if you go to a world that's got less magic, because your ability is dependent on your reach, then you can do less because there's less that you can reach. So you could potentially, if you're powerful enough to draw enough magic in to move to another world, and that world has too little magic and you haven't stored any, then you can't get out of that world again. So all these sorts of ideas I thought were really fun. So that's kind of the way my brain works when it comes to magic. So I hope that answers the question.
Oh, that's really cool. Mine was kind of incidentally made up one day in a car while listening to my aunt talk, which is a really weird way to make up a magic system. She was talking about all of the past lives that she had been regressed through, which, is pretty much my aunt in a nutshell. But anyway, I was thinking about this as a concept of in terms of like fantasy situation, like would souls who had, like, if you were coming back for another time, I think the question I asked myself was, if you've been back multiple times, why aren't you a bit smarter? But it kind of made me think, are people different if they come back multiple times? And would then a first incarnation be relatively a simple person? Would a later incarnation be one of those people that you think of as a wise old soul kind of idea? And that everybody that you meet is somewhere in between for the most part? And what would the limit be? And then I was sitting there thinking, well, maybe the limit actually has there's a set limit of this many incarnations. And then after that, stuff starts to get really weird, with all the stuff that, the brain can do that we shouldn't do.
Each copy degenerating as it goes along.
Right, like there's that idea of which way does that work, and so ultimately I ended up developing a soul science-based magic system in which the number of times you have been, they call it over-incarnated, which is above the 7 times that you should naturally do so to be a normal person, it has a different effect on some kind of magical capabilities. And then there is variation within those in terms of some people are still born with fairly weak skills in that regard, or fairly strong skills. Like my original trilogy had empaths. So they are the 9th incarnation of a soul that's only meant to live 7 times. But in terms of empaths, there are strong ones, there are weak ones. They have varying kind of different skills that they're capable of depending on, just the way they were made. I ended up then just questioning, it was essentially just taking that idea of reincarnation and trying to make it into a magical science and to give it rules. And I've given it rules to the extent where I've actually written an audio drama that is the scientific diaries of the witch doctor, who is you meet him at the very, very end of We Ride the Storm for the first time. He is an immortal being that is essentially studied. He started off studying sort of human physiology and medicine and stuff, and has ended up studying the soul science. And so I have gone through and put an awful lot of rules and graphs and things like that to the science of my soul magic. So that's it, funny. And now I get to play with that.
It's funny. I was just thinking the whole idea of when after the 7th incarnation, the souls start to degenerate and things get weird. And I thought that explains some politicians, doesn't it?
It explains a lot of things.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see what else we've got. Okay, right at the top we have, what are some things that completely hook you on a book as a reader, and how do you try to hook your readers with your writing?
Plot is everything. It's like you have so much fun inventing characters, you have so much fun inventing worlds, but in the end it's the narrative drive. It's how you get people hooked right from the beginning. And I used to do workshops called That Got Your Attention, which I will say that it's all about setting up the tension right from word go, and that you can put tension in description, and you can put tension in kinds of writing that you don't think would be there. It's like sometimes they say the hardest thing to do is get a character to walk across the room. So, well, okay, can you add tension to that? So how would you add tension to that? So, that I think for me is like when I start reading a book and I look for the great opening line, I look for the great first paragraph, I look for the great first page. And if I get past that and I'm like, oh, I really want to know what's happening next, I know I've got somebody who's got that skill. So, yeah, that's it, everyone. Devin has that skill. Like, that's the first. I really have to read this now. This is good. Yeah. It's that narrative drive. Once you set that tension up and you keep going, but there's lots of tricks to it. And I wouldn't. Yeah, if I start going on about all the tricks, we've got 10 minutes left, and you'll never get another question in. So over to you, Devin.
Yeah. I feel like we could probably talk about that one for quite a while. On the idea of the great sort of opening lines and paragraphs, for me, it's always started with the narrative voice. So I really love very interesting narrative voices where you can kind of feel the personality of the character coming through in the beginning. That will always get me to keep reading a lot longer than something that has a relatively straight narrative voice to it. So a lot of like the beginning of the 10,000 Doors of January had that, where January is kind of speaking to us, and you can feel like her voice and her personality in her voice. You get that with a lot of Mark Lawrence books, where you can often get there's like humor in the beginning of the voice. That run really kind of, it always just grips me that little bit more. The odd observation that is very personal. So voice to me is the thing, I think, which is why I tend to write in first person, because I really like bringing that sense of the character to the actual narration.
You're in their head.
Yeah. I like to do that. I mean, not that you can't do that in third person as well, but you just get that it's that extra kick in first person, where even the way they describe things, or the way they're kind of in a monologue, is unique to the particular character that you're reading about, which I think is really interesting, because we all do think very differently and notice different things and focus on different things, and being able to see that just adds kind of that extra colored dimension, I think, to most stories. So that one will always hook me best, and what I tend to use myself.
Yeah. I did find the three characters in your book were a wonderful contrast to each other, in that you've got Miko, who's a person in a position of power who has none, like very little, and then you've got a person who's in a position of power, of no power, which is Cassandra, and then she's down the lowest end of society, but she has so much power over other people, so that there's fabulous little contrast. And then you've got poor Raj. Try to remember. Ra, yeah. Who is powerless in both ways.
Yeah. Poor Ra.
So sorry for him.
I actually have a few friends who insist on calling him the Labrador, because he's a bit like a cute Labrador.
He is too. They're right.
It's gonna stick. I can see it's gonna stick.
Yeah.
All right, what other questions have we got? Do we have any others that are for both of us? All right, this is a good one that's for both of us. Okay, so how do you separate your work life from your private life?
Different rooms. Yeah, I have a big house, and which is 15 books later, I have a big house, I have to say. And thank you very much for all the fans who bought my books, because that means I have a big house. So, but that means I have an office, this room, and everything in this room is about the work, and everything outside of this room is not about work. So I come in here, I'm in a work frame of mind. So yeah, that's how I keep them separate. And the other thing too is, when it comes to time, it's really hard, because deadlines creep up on you, and because I've got the problems with the hands and the back, and so sometimes it'll get really bad and I won't be able to do anything for 3 days. And so that means my whole idea of working only Monday to Friday goes out the window. And the one thing I'm always so happy about when I finish an edit and I'm waiting for feedback, or I take a break for a month or something like that, is that I finally get weekends back. That's something I fail at, but I do find that mentally, as long as you walk out the room, close the door, go off and do something else, you're back in your personal life.
I have not managed much in the way of like proper differentiation, because my deadlines have been so tight that I work in like every room of the house. I solve plot problems while I go for walks. I sit and do like my emails and admin stuff, write blog posts and whatever on the couch in the evenings. So I don't actually have downtime at the moment, which doesn't help. It means that work kind of bleeds into absolutely everything that I do. But as a kind of neat extra. Devin Madson is not actually my real life name. So I have an interesting kind of separation in the fact that, like, when I'm being Devin, which is most of the time, because, most of my socializing is online. I live in the bush. So, most of the stuff I do is online, and I'm actually, it's actually weirder to be called my real name than it is to be called Devin these days. Like, I prefer to just be Devin Madson and in my workspace. But it is kind of nice to be able to go, oh, but I'm also this other person, and I can leave my house to go shopping and play with my kid and do whatever as this other person who has a completely different name and can be a different person. They can be a mess, whatever, and Devin can be like professional. and it's nice. The separation is good.
I'm used to being so many different things. Like, I was an illustrator and I'm an artist, and do craft, and I sometimes teach craft as well. So I have all these different worlds that are part of what I am. So I'm used to being a multi-layered person, and I just mentally compartmentalize things fairly easily.
That's handy.
Sometimes I bleed, but most of the time I can separate things. It keeps you sane, or just a little bit insane. Yeah. Okay.
It sounds like it takes
I'm looking
practice.
at my clock thinking we've got 3 minutes left, but let's see if we can squeeze another question in.
Yeah, you can find one.
Okay. Are you a discovery writer or a planner? I think it is. Do you know how the series will develop? So, in other words, are you a pantser or a plotter?
I'm weirdly both. So I pants the hell out of first books of series. So I had no idea what was going to happen in We Ride the Storm when I first sat down. I had the world, obviously, because I kind of already wrote in the world, and I'd written a series that was set 17 years earlier. So I had a bit of basis on the actual location. But I didn't know who Cassandra was. I didn't know who Ra was. I didn't know who the Levante was. I had no idea. I sat down and I went, I need a really cool line to start this book with. And I came up with, it's harder to sever a head than people think. And I went, ooh, okay, cool. And so now I have an entire society in which that is part of their respectful death rites, that they sever heads. Yeah. And everything just kind of grew from there. But when I moved to the third book, possibly because I already have the characters and I've already got 2 books of plot behind it, it's really much easier to kind of extrapolate what these people would do in a natural form of planning. I find if I plan without knowing who my characters really are, because I've never written them, I can't stick to that plan because they turn out to be completely different people. But by the third book, I found that I could make a plan and more or less stick to it because I already knew who the people were. And at a book 3, 4 in a series, I feel like the plan is important because then I know that I've got the right amount of time to wrap it up in, and I feel like it's going in the right direction. So start as a complete pantser, end up as a plotter.
Yep. I'm a plotter extraordinaire. I go to extreme levels, mostly because of the back problems and because time is so limited for me when I'm writing that I'll actually write a description of the scene I'm about to write before I write the scene nowadays. Never used to be like that.
Oh, wow.
But at the same time, I do it in stages. So I have like an overall plot, which is divided into various pacing points and things like that. And then as I work, I fill in the gaps with plottings before I actually write the scenes. So I'm still plotting everything before I write it, but I've got some room for movement in there as well. So I might say, this is part 1, and there's a bit where they've got to go from X to Z and achieve Y, and I just sort of leave it up to the flow of the story. As long as, I know it's going to fit and I know it's within certain parameters, but I leave myself a bit of freedom there. But I still will, as I get to that point, plot it before I write it, because it keeps the amount of typing down, the less key strokes, the faster I can. And I've got very good at getting a first draft pretty much right the first time. So
that's good. That's handy.
14, 15 books later, you at least hope that you get something improvement happening. And, my brain does seem to have got it down better in the first draft. Not perfect, but mostly there. So,
it's interesting you say that, because I remember seeing you on a panel at the Aussie WorldCon in Melbourne in 2010, and you saying then, so this is even 10 years ago, right? And 10 years ago, you said that that your first drafts were taking longer, but getting better. So it's good to know that you continued with that that trajectory.
They're a lot longer, but they're a lot better. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get to the point where things are taking so long that by the time I get to the end, I forgot what I did in the start. So it's a bit more revising, which makes it take even longer. So
yeah,
Oh,
definitely.
that's a good one. So I'm wondering, it's now 11:01 according to me. These are an hour long, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So I'm thinking what we should do is say bye, and then if we can, and then just keep talking and see how long it goes. So let's just go. Thank you very much for coming and asking lovely questions. And it's been wonderful to chat. And Devin?
Yeah, thank you. It was really great. And really fantastic to talk to you too, Trudi. Like, it's weird that we live in the same country and have never actually met or done anything together. This is Australia. It's like the tiniest.
At some point.
Yes, at Worldcon in 2010. Yeah, but yeah, it's funny. Australia's weird like that. Like it's such a big place that we don't really get to meet up as much as the tiny scene that we have really should allow. You'd expect that we would all see each other more often than we actually do because, Australia's too big.
Yes, conventions do help, but they are a commitment in time and money, and new authors often don't have the money. And it's not even necessarily the price of getting into the convention, it's the flights and the hotels and things like that. It's going to be prohibitively expensive. Yeah. Especially when you don't necessarily have a mate that you can stay with. But also I found that I just had, because I'm taking longer to write things, I have less ability to spend the time going to a convention. So I've been going to less and less of them. Kind of hoping with my big break. I was hoping that this year, I think a nice big break, I'll go to conventions, and then what happens? COVID-19. So I can't do anything now. It's all cancelled. But on the other hand, this is brilliant. I think so many people have noticed that you can get people together, and it's not that hard to get people together online. And I've now got 2 conventions overseas, one in Poland and one in the UK, that they're seeing if I could actually be part of via video link, which means I don't have to take a 24+ hour flight, take a week to get over jet lag because I'm terrible at getting over jet lag, and take all the health problems that I have with my back, get exacerbated by planes and hotel beds, and the hideous expense. I should be in Poland at the moment, and I would love to be in Poland because I'd organised to have a holiday all around it and all around the convention and the Warsaw Book Fair and things like that, and but
this is really nice though. I do think it's great for the people who for whatever various reasons, health reasons, financial reasons, distance, can't get to the things. It kind of helps with that idea I mentioned earlier about the isolation of being in Australia, while feeling you should be a really grateful portion of kind of the Western kind of spec thing, but you're also kind of not. You're in fact further away than most other people.
Really
going to America is pretty much the furthest we can possibly go. So
well,
it's a bit weird.
London's like the other end of the world almost equally as well. So I get jealous when I'm over there and I'll be at London or a little convention in Europe somewhere, and then there'll be another writer I know of who's just popped across, and it took them 6 hours to get there. They do this every year, and I'm like, and no idea what a trial it is to come from Australia. And the invitations they come thinly because probably the convention organisers go, let's get Trudi, and they look at what the price of the fares are. They go, let's not.
And they go, no, let's not do that.
But it's extremely generous when they do invite you. So the invitations do come.
When the world is normal again, I guess maybe.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
Shall we throw in another question and see what it takes us?
We may as well. I'm not sure if we're supposed to wait for our voice of God or not.